got everybody, ladies. So grab your weapon of choice, your roller. We're going to start through that kind of posterior, the back of your hip, your glutes. So as before, with your soft roller, you can go most anywhere. With your hard roller, stick to the fleshier bits. And then hopefully now you know what your hot spots are. So if you're facing more up to the ceiling, you're going to get kind of the middle of your glutes. If piriformis is tight for you, think about crossing that top leg over and then dropping that knee to the floor. That's going to enable you to find it a bit better. If you've got a soft foam roller, but there are parts of your body actually where you need something more, you can always use a hard one. If you've got both, that's never a problem. It's just giving you the option, particularly when things are tense, to not be putting kind of too much form through those muscles. You can get more through onto the side. You can do really big, nice, slow swoops up and down. I tend to prefer doing kind of little smaller areas and then moving my way kind of along the roller. But wherever you need to be is where you're going to spend that time. So you've got about another 10 seconds or so there. And then just in the interest of time, I'm going to move us on. And then into the other side. So I'm going to turn slightly rather than totally put my back to you. So for me, this can be really nice across my lower back. And then as I come into my glutes, I know I'm tighter through that piriformis, so I prefer to get onto the side. I can just stay here. Those nice deep breaths, that long, slow exhale as the roller just kind of the muscle sinks around it. You can do that tiny little kind of scrubbing action. You can really think about pressing your body down or easing yourself off, using your arms to support you. And again, in terms of direction, you can go up and down the muscle. You can go across the muscle fibers. They're all perfectly acceptable as long as you're not creating pain. We want the nervous system to relax and let go of those muscles. So finding where you're tight and just rolling through there. You've got about 10 seconds left here, and then we're going to move into the front of your thighs and up into your hip. Again, working for those spots that are kind of tighter for you. So as we talked about in previous weeks, I quite prefer to have the roller right on the edge so I can get right up into my hip, the other knee forward, and then again, using your body, using your hands, getting in those weird and wonderful positions for getting right up around my hip socket and my psoas. As I come lower down, I can stay in exactly that position. And then I can really think about turning my leg in, turning out, finding where I'm tightest. But this one I do quite like, getting a bit of action sometimes through both quads together, particularly through the middle of them. So with both feet off the floor, it is all of my body weight then pressing onto the roller. So if you're really tight here, that might be too much. And therefore that one-legged version that we've just been doing might be the right answer. Again, you can kind of turn to the side slightly. Hopefully you know where your spots are now and you can spend a little bit more time there. You've got about 10 seconds here, and then we're going to move on to the other leg. Although if you're doing both as I am, you can absolutely stay here for a little bit longer. So switch leg if you're on one side. If you're doing both, you can carry on, or you can think about rolling into the outsides of those thighs. Think slightly off your IT band. So that's that thin sinewy bit that runs from your knee to your hip. That is not going to loosen anytime soon, but just off it, either side of it, there tends to be quite a lot of tension that you can really ease off with. So have a little bit of a play about, stopping and pausing, always focusing on that exhale and working through where you feel tighter. I'm just going to move rather than stick my bum to you as I'm rolling. You've got about 10 seconds left here, and then we're going to work our way down into those calves. Right. So as always, if I'm leaning further back, there's less pressure on my calves. If I'm leaning forward, there can be a bit more. You can do both together. I quite like to do one at a time here, so I can really work into the different areas. Again, rotating through the hips, so turning the foot in or out, finding the bits that just feel a little bit more tender. If you want a bit more, you can put the other leg on top and even lift your bum off the floor. That's going to increase the pressure through that roller. So you're looking for those areas where it feels more tight. I started down by my kind of Achilles, by my heel, and then worked my way up through the calves, rotating that foot and just finding the areas where I'm like, yeah, that's where I could do with a little bit more. We've got about 10 seconds more on this calf. And then I'm going to get into the other side. 3, 2, 1. So swap over, get into the other leg. So I know everything about my left-hand side needs a bit more rolling than the right. You can point and flex the foot while putting some pressure on the roller. You don't even need to move. You can just relax there, particularly if things are really tight. And again, on that movement, think like 4 or 5 out of 10 pressure. We're not going kind of for all out pushing through. If we create too much pain and too much sensation, if we find ourselves holding our breath, that tends to elicit a stress response in our nervous system, which tends to be unhelpful in terms of getting things to relax. So you're just trying to go gently, listening to what that muscle's telling you as you're getting into it, breathing nice and steady, and just moving in a manner that feels like a nice kind of tension, as opposed to one that's making you grit your teeth and bite down. About 3 seconds here. And then I'm going to come over into the front of my lower leg now, into the shins. So with a soft one, remember, think about a towel or something a bit more gentle. I tend to prefer like a hip flexor position and then rolling through here. So again, I'm not trying to go up and down the shin bone. I'm just off center of it, where those muscles are, particularly when you're experiencing shin splints and the like, and they feel really tight. Just finding those areas, using your hands to support you. You don't need to put all the weight on that front leg, whatever feels good, but working through the front of those shins too. What have we got? We've got about 15 seconds here. So I know, again, it's the inside for me that tends to be tightest. So that's where I'm going to focus my time this evening. Again, hopefully you should just be quite aware now, or you might be discovering new hotspots, particularly if you've been wearing those heels, and switch into the other side. So again, finding positions that feel good for you. So this one really works for me, but if you prefer to put the other knee down, if that feels really stressful, you can absolutely still roll in this position here. I quite like the foot up because it generates more force down onto the roller, so I can get more through here. But if that feels too much, absolutely pop the knee down instead. And we're going to move into our feet next. So hopefully you've got your ball handy. If you haven't, don't worry. We're not going to spend too long there. So again, turning the foot so you're just off center of your shin. Or if you've ended up coming all the way back round almost into your calf on the side, if that's what needs the attention, that's absolutely where you're focusing your time. Right. Rollers away. I'm going to grab hold of my ball. I'm going to wake up those feet. So as before, doesn't matter whether it's spiky, tennis, massage, just something that's got a bit of grip and tension to it. So I'm exploring that foot, coming up and down, following the natural curves around the foot. I can just lean on it. Again, that nice slow exhale. My belt's disappearing. Most people tend to find most of their tension is under the arch of their foot and under their big toe. You might be different. You might be finding it in different places. So exploring. Again, I'm going up and down to start with, but we don't have to always go up and down. We can absolutely scrub across the foot. So for this one, I like to plant the heel on the floor and then use that kind of bit of purchase to come from side to side. Again, I can have more of my toes, less of my toes on the ball, and just explore that in different places. And then moving to the other side, we know our feet are basically the start of everything. That's the piece of us that hits the floor first, that deals with those ground force reactions. It's fascially connected all through our calves, our hamstrings, up into our pelvic floor. There's so much going on in the feet with all those bones, muscles, mechanoreceptors. And hopefully you've learned through the last few weeks the importance of having a stable foot, bit of that arch. If you haven't, go back to some of those exercises in week 1 and very much practice some of those to build some nice strength and stability in your feet. Also brilliant of then when you ground your feet, really being able to feel your pelvic floor in a more helpful manner. I'm going to go side to side now on this foot. This one definitely is tighter again than the other. I told you, it's my whole left-hand side. of just working into those areas, or just staying still and just exhaling, leaning on any of those kind of tougher spots. Right. Self-massage done, we are moving into our mobility section for the evening. So we are on week 4 now of this program. So some of these moves are more difficult than the moves we've done in previous weeks. So I'm going to talk you through lots of options. As always, it's about moving into places that feel good and give you a nice stretch that feel, yeah, exactly that feel good. If you are moving somewhere where you're feeling pain or it doesn't work for you, dial the move back or indeed substitute it for something else. So we're starting today with a bit of a springing plank. Some people call this an animal squat, various movements going on. But we're basically looking at some compression and extension through your hips, some nice stability through your torso. So you are going to start yourself in a plank position. So I'm going to do this in a full plank, but know that if that isn't right for you at the moment, you can still do this on your knees. You just obviously don't create as much stability through your body on your knees as you will in a full plank. So I want you to think about, if I face you for a moment, corkscrewing your hands into the floor. So they're not just passively down. I've got my fingers nice and spread, and then I've turned the pit of my elbows towards the front. And then again, I've really pushed my shoulder blades away. So I've got some lovely tension through my upper body. Big toes are getting a bit of love here, tucked up in that high plank position. You can spread your legs wider, it might be a tad easier for some of you. So we are going to push and sit back into this as we compress through the hips. Sit your bum back towards your heels and then drive yourself forward really nice and solid. So as I said, you can do this in a knees down position, but you need to really think about creating some stability because it's quite easy to just move without any stability through your torso. So corkscrew those hands into the floor, nice strong plank position. You're then going to sit your bum back towards your heels, keeping that torso nice and stable, and drive yourself forward again. So we've got anywhere between, well, up to a minute in this position. So if at any point you need to take a pause, that's exactly what you're going to do. I'll talk you through it on the timer. So really think about everything really switched on here. Thinking about shoulder blades being pushed apart. Pull them together as you move through that movement. We've got that compression through your hips as you sit back, and then come on forward. You might find this quite hard. You might not be able to sit back so far. That's no problem at all. Work with whatever range works for you. So there's your 30 seconds is already done. You're slightly over. So if you want to take a pause at this point, you can absolutely stop. If you still feel good, you still feel strong, keep that going. So nice long neck, looking at the floor ahead of you, not down at your hands, although I do keep looking back at you. We've got about 5 seconds left here. As I said, at any point you can stop. 3, 2, 1. Come on up. So we're going to go into a split stance next. So think about that split stance we've been practicing. Hips are nice and wide, so we're not on a tightrope. We're coming into that lunge position. And then, I'll turn this way slightly. You'll remember in previous weeks, with an elevated foot, not elevated foot, we've been rocking forwards and backwards. We've been coming from side to side. We're going to explore lots of different movements in this position today. So I'll face you initially, and then I'll turn off center again in a second. In your split stance position, and you can absolutely shorten this up if you're struggling, I want you to really work on keeping both toes pointing forward. So if you're feeling or even seeing your hip, well, it is as a result of your hip, your heel whipping or out, I want you to really focus on forwards. And then in this position, driving the movement with the hips, but you'll use your arms to counterbalance you. You're going to explore, imagine you're in like a zorb. We're going zorbing in a lunge, because that's never going to happen. You are trying to reach all the different areas of the zorb. So you're really thinking about as much movement as you can through the hips. You're going to wobble, it's going to make you unstable. That's okay, that's normal. Have a little play with it. So sinking down into your split lunge, and again, shorter and less if you need. Start moving with the hips, and then using your arms as counterbalances. So imagine you're trying to reach every little bit of that zorb bubble. It can be low, can be really out to the side, can be higher. So I'm going to turn back to face you, you keep going. So we're trying not to move the body, that's staying really super still. It's the hips moving in and out, the feet are pacing forwards, and you are really reaching, using your arms as counterbalance. And you might wobble, that's okay. We're working on that stability, that activation of those muscles. So you're going to start to feel that, probably in both legs to be fair, but particularly in the front leg. Really stretching, you might get low, you might really reach high, but the movement is all hips. And then arms are following as a balance. We've got about 5 seconds left on this leg. Obviously, at any point you need to stop, you're going to stop. And then we're going to switch into the other side. So exactly the same thing again. Into that split lunge with your feet hip distance apart. Drop that back knee down slightly. It doesn't need to go super low, but we've got that nice hip extension. And then off we go, moving those hips from side to side. Oh, there's a wall there. Using your arms as a counterbalance. I'm going to again turn to face you. It's really weird talking to a camera when you're like sideways on. So hips are moving forwards, backwards, diagonally. We're reaching out all the way around that zorb, trying to feel what's going on, using the arms in whatever manner feels best for you. You can go low, which is really going to load that front leg. You can lean back slightly, really extending through those hips. Nice work. You've got about 10 seconds left. Obviously, pausing at any point, having a break as you need to. 2, 1, take a pause. So if you're feeling that in any particular parts, feel free to stretch them off at the moment. If that's the front of your hips and thighs, this is a nice place to be. If it's your hamstrings, think about straightening one leg and sitting back into that and just loosening that off for a moment. We're going to do that one more time, and then we're going to move on to something else. But I'm only going to make you do about 30 seconds this time. I'm going to grab a quick drink, actually. So now we know what we're doing. Feet hip distance apart, into your lunging position, that slight extension through the hips, so you've got a nice stretch going on here as well. Drop the knee a little bit, and then exploring with those hips, off we go. So you might be reaching low, reaching high, using your arms as a counterbalance, but the movement is all hips. Obviously, don't go too far back, that'll be awful for your back, but there can be that element of pushing forward. Keep the ribs down, and then you'll be nice and engaged through the torso. So what have we got? About 10 seconds left on this leg. So really exploring. You can reach back, you can reach up. 3, 2, 1. Switching into the other leg. So again, hip distance, toes pointing forward. Nice stretch through that hip, sinking down. Moving the hips, and then using your arms as much or as little as you need to. So you can just really stretch with the hips if you want, but you'll probably find that you end up really super wobbly. So instead, using your arm as a counterbalance to help you stay nice. So again, make sure those toes are still pointing forwards. Well, we've got about 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Ease that off. We're going into now what we call a prone scorpion. So we're going to be lying face down on the floor. Again, I want you to ease into this and to only go as far as feels good for you. So I'm going to be lying on my front, literally nice and flat with my arms out in a T shape. Thank God I've got a mic on, or this would be really muffled. And then in this position, I am going to push my hands into the floor. I've slightly got a wall in the way. I'm going to lift one hip and I'm going to rotate. So movement through the hip, movement through the middle of your back. You can either just keep your head down and take the leg as far around as feels good. If you want more of a stretch, you're going to turn and look towards the foot that you've rotated. So if that's too much, don't go there. So from your T shape, sticking on one side, lift one hip, rotate it away from you, and either keeping your head down or looking in the direction of that foot. You can ease in and out of this, or you can come here and stay here. So really opening up through the hip, opening up through that mid-back. We've talked about the importance of that thoracic movement as well as through the hip. See if you can go a bit further. You can come down to the floor, or you can keep the leg high, but the aim is to take it as far around as feels good. And then we're going to move to the other side. So again, head can stay down, or you can turn and look towards that foot. You can aim for the floor, you can aim higher. You can ease in and out of this, but working on that lovely rotation and opening up that hip at the same time. As I said, if it's too much, don't look at the foot. Just keep your head down on the floor so your neck is nice and relaxed. I keep looking up partly to look at the camera as well as my foot. And then if you just alternate for the last few between those two sides. So you're going to take it one way around, pushing into the floor, rotating as far as feels good. We've got one more here. And ease that off. All right. We are done for our mobility, section this evening. So hopefully everything's feeling a bit looser, as well as having worked some of those muscles. We're going to go into our activation now, so very much designed to get those muscles working. We are starting today with a single leg glute bridge. If at any point in this is just too challenging for you, I want you to go back to a two-footed glute bridge and really focus on creating some nice tension through your glutes. Equally, if you feel like you want the challenge of a single leg, but you can't do kind of a minute, that's fine. Just aim for kind of 20 seconds, 30 seconds on one side. You will build the strength in this position and move from there. So for our glute bridges, I want you to think about keeping your hips nice and level. So as you drive up, if one's dipping or the other, that's not going to work. You want everything really nice and engaged. Bent leg is going to be slightly easier. Straight leg has basically got more gravity working on it. So again, think about the option that's right for you. And you can go really nice and slowly, peeling one vertebrae up at a time and coming nice and slowly back down again. Some of you will choose to kind of go faster and to drive up and down. Either is fine. So off we go. As you exhale, you're going to ground that foot, squeeze and lift that pelvic floor, drive yourself up and slowly lower under control. If you're already pretty good at this and you want to get a few more reps in, no problem, but make sure they're all really quality reps where you are feeling your bum and not your lower back. So you might well feel some hamstrings in here, some hips too. That's all okay, that's really normal. You should particularly feel your bum at the top of the move. So really think about squeezing those glutes. You've done more than 30 seconds now, so if anybody needs a rest, absolutely, come on down. Squeezing that bum, keeping those hips nice and level, driving on up. We've got about 5 seconds left here. 3, 2, 1. And then switch over to the other side. So again, plant that foot nice and grounded. Think about that short foot we've been practicing. You're going to roll yourself up one vertebrae at a time as you exhale, and then you're going to lower yourself under control again. Exhale up. Squeeze those glutes, squeeze and lift that pelvic floor. Everything is happening on the exhale as you come on up. So I'm going slowly, kind of rolling through that one vertebrae at a time as I come off the floor. You can just come straight up and down if that feels better for you. Think about your hand positioning. If you're holding onto a mat or the floor, you're creating tension. Palms up means your bum's having to do all the work. Arms up to the ceiling. There's absolutely no support from the floor at all. 3, 2, 1. All right. And then have a little notice. Was it much easier on one side than the other? Where's the strength? When you're practicing single leg moves, I would always say when you're kind of consciously thinking about it, start with your weakest leg first. Do the kind of rep set that you're looking for on that leg and don't do more on your stronger side. Otherwise, it becomes really hard to even out that imbalance. So we're going into a T-step now. So again, really thinking about opening up through the hips. It's called a T-step because I've got one foot pointing forward and the other foot is going to go across it to make a T. So again, I want you to work with your mobility and what feels good. It may be less of a T. It might be you come in the middle. You might come further over. Again, I'll kind of do it from this angle so you can see. You're making something like a T. The foot could be further away, but somewhere where you feel comfortable. In that position, I'm then going to soften up that front leg, push my hips and open up through my hips. I'm going to rotate slightly. So you can take your arms out in front of you, less of a rotation. You can take your arms round, more of a rotation, and then ease that off. So step into a T, push your hips, your bum back, open up through those hips and rotate, and then loosen that off again. And then play about with that foot positioning. As I said, it might be that kind of less of a T feels better for you, more somewhere in the middle, but you should be feeling a nice opening through those hips, which you're then easing off again. So bending that front leg, opening up into it and coming back. So all about hips every week. thoracic rotation, glutes, these bits that are so fundamental to our running. So again, if you're finding this really hard and really tight, there's definitely something to be focused on there. Let's have it on the other side. So again, 1 foot forward, 1 foot across, making that T shape. You're then going to soften and hinge to the sides. I'm going to do it slightly at an angle, make that a bit clearer what I'm up to. Clear as mud, I'm sure. So easing into it, and then you can step back out of it and step back in again. If it feels really good, feel free to spend a bit more time here. Again, exploring angles. Does it work better if you twist a bit more? If you lengthen a little bit more, where are you feeling that best opening through the hips? Loosening that off as you kind of need to. Again, like if your leg's straighter, benter, what gives, benter? That's not even a word. More straight, straighter, yes, or more bent. How does that feel for you? So easing into it, rotating as much or as little feels good, and ease that off. Right, we are heading into our strength section. So we are going to repeat these moves. We're going to come back to them. So we're starting today. We've practiced our calf raises. We've done some double. We've done some single. Today we're going to do our single leg negative calf raises. So if you remember, we talked about doing double. Let me actually use this. I'll stay more in shot that way. Where we got our toes up on a step before and we were coming up and then we were lowering so that we were able to get below the floor. When you're on the floor, you can only get to the floor again, whereas if you've got your toes on something, you can hang off it, get that nice stretch through the calf and get a much greater range as you come up and down. So it's exactly what we're going to do, but we're single legging today, we're not double leg. So find your step, feel free to run away from the camera if you need to. You're going to come, just checking where I'm on the timer, you're going to come up. This is a bit tricky because this is soft and slidey, but I'm going to give it my best shot so I stay in shot. And then come down again. So the lower your heel comes beneath the step, the more of a stretch you'll get at the bottom of this. And then you're getting all the way up as high as you can, up on top of those toes. So really working that calf through its full range of motion. And again, at any point you need to, you can pause and stop. If your calves are burning, I'm not here to torture you, just to strengthen those muscles. I may well have to adjust myself in a minute because I'm slowly slipping off this dome. What have we got? We've got about 15 seconds left for the minute. So if you're done, that's okay. We're coming back to this, remember? So don't exhaust your calves on the first round through. There is more to come. 3, 2, 1. So at any point, if you need to, stretch that off. You might just hang for a second and loosen that. And then we're going to come into the other foot. So exactly the same again. Going below the step. And then driving yourself up on top of those toes, really working all the way through that. If I take the other foot out of the way so you can see, all the way through that calf. So absolutely feel free to hold on to something here. If you're not, you're just going to balance all over the shot, which kind of defeats the purpose. Balance is important, and we do want to train that in certain skills, but I'm more interested in your calves in this one. You've got about 20 seconds left. So again, if this is too much, just pause at any time. We've got another round coming up. If it feels good, I say good, it's probably not the right word to use, is it? Keep on going. 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1, and let go. So again, mental note, physical note. Which side feels really different? Are they quite even? Is that quite easy? Is that quite challenging for you? So we're going into a single leg shrimp squat now. I don't know who called it a shrimp. It's probably to do with the shape of your body when you're in it. So people who are very good at this, not me, would typically stand on one leg, hold on to the back leg, take one arm out in front of them, and then sink themselves down really low all the way to the floor and back up in a squat. You do not need to hold your legs and arms if you don't want to. We can work in a much smaller range where you're thinking about leg goes back. That's why this kind of position happens, because we want that bit of hip extension. Oh, I'm going to face you. I can't balance and look the other way, where you're going to sink on down and drive back up again. So in this position, single leg squat. So if you want to, feel free. Some people find that that helps with balance, to be able to have something to hold. Find something to look at, because that's definitely going to help with your balance. You're going to sink it down, drive it up again. So all single leg work this evening because running is a single leg activity. So I want you to really think about as you get to the bottom, engaging that short foot, exhaling as you drive up. So I'm going to come back to face you for a second. So again, if you're holding your foot, you don't want the leg out, you want everything nice and tight, whoop, sinking down and driving up again. With your knee going as much over your toe as possible so it's not collapsing massively in or out. Again, that short foot's going to help you there. It's going to create nice tension. At any point, you can take a pause and ease that off. So we're going to have a go on the other leg now. And again, how does this compare? I know this is going to be much harder. So you can hold the foot as we did before and use the arm, or you can just take the leg behind you and do a smaller movement here. Off we go. So it doesn't have to be super deep. It doesn't have to be super dramatic, but obviously the more hip extension you've got and the lower you sink into that squat, and turn back again, the easier, and not the easier, the more you're going to get out of that because you're working harder. So the other arm is for balance. Told you this isn't a good side. Exhaling as you come up, engaging that short foot, really driving through that squat. So pausing as and where you need to. And we've got about 20 seconds left, unless you want to call time beforehand. On every exercise, know that's always an option for you. Definitely need to practice this side. 3, 2, 1. Ease that off. We are deadlifting next. And again, single leg this evening. We're on week 4. We are focusing on single leg work. But if your deadlift needs work, feel free to go back to two-footed. And the reason I say that is your deadlift is a hinge movement. It's not a squat. It is your bum physically pushing backwards. So the best way to check that you are hinging, stand against your wall, come one of your feet's distance away from the wall, and then send your bum backwards, hinge at the hips. If you're hinging and you can't feel the wall, your hinge needs a bit more work. So I want you to really focus on everything nice and tight. So you're up tall, ribs are down, shoulder blades are back and down, sending your bum back. You come back to standing by virtue of pressing your bum forward. So it isn't you lifting with your upper body. So again, if I turn this way, it's not upper body coming first and then glutes. It's glutes driving me up. So if you've got a good hinge, you're coming single leg with me. If you haven't, you're going to really focus on that hinge because that's really important. For your single leg, you are going to think about floating that leg back, coming into like a T shape, and then bringing yourself back to standing. So it's tipping over, but it's not chest first and then leg. It's not leg and then chest. It's everything in one go, coming over and coming back again. And don't go so far that you lose your shape. So if you're like arching or rounding, no good, make it a smaller movement. Off we go. So really pushing through that back heel, keeping your hips pointing down to the floor. You're going to hinge on over and bring yourself back to standing. So again, looking at the floor ahead of you, not down at your toes, keeping that really nice engaged core. This might be a smaller movement. You might be here. You are still going to get all the work and benefit from this deadlift. Obviously, the further you can go, the more challenging, but you don't need to. So I'm going to turn to face you. We're going to kick the wall. Yep, that's not a good plan. What I want you to think about is your hips. If you find this is happening, then I want you to make it less of a movement, really keeping your hips down to the floor. And again, think about your back foot. A lot of us rotate because our hips are tight. We want everything really nice and straight. We've got about 10 seconds left. Exhale to come back to standing. Hinge yourself over. 3, 2, 1. There's your minute. Always able to call time early. Other side now. So again, really push through that leg, through the back heel. Hinge yourself over and make it small to start with. Get that movement going, and then you can start to sink deeper into that. You might well find that one side is much easier than the other. If you really want to, for a few reps, you can put your fingertips on the wall to help you feel that through, but you tend to find people lean into it. So I'd rather you made it a smaller movement and really worked through it. You'll probably find your foot and your ankles moving all over the place, trying to help you balance. So you're working all through that arch, through that STJ that we've been talking about, particularly in week 1. Well, we've got about 20 seconds. At any point, take a break, keeping those hips pointing forwards, really driving through that back heel. You're going to feel that glute working on the standing leg. Hips staying down. Oh, I shouldn't have turned. 3, 2, 1. Take a pause. We've got some lunging next. So I'm going to come out into a side lunge, straight leg, bent leg, bum goes back, chest comes up, and then I'm going to sink myself into a curtsy lunge. Again, hips stay forwards. Off we go. So we're exhaling as we come back to standing. You can come between those two positions and stop in the middle. You can float between those two positions if you feel more comfortable. I say not more comfortable. If you feel comfortable enough and you have the balance. If that feels difficult, come back to the middle. Take your time. Exhaling between those moves. So hips stay pointing forwards, leg crosses behind into the side, get that knee low down on that curtsy, but only as low as works for you. So it might be here and here. It might be a smaller range on that for you. It might be a deeper range, but I want you to make sure that that hip is the furthest thing, not your toes or your knees. Right, come into the other side. Make sure you've got some space. Out into your side lunge, bent leg, straight leg, and then into your curtsy. Hips are pointing forwards. And then as before, if you want to come between those two and you don't feel like you need to pause in the middle, that's no problem. If that's tricky, stop in the middle. Exhale to return. Keep that chest up on that side lunge so that we're not collapsing into this. And then, yeah, working in whatever range and pace feels good for you. Or floating between the two of them, if that feels good too. Again, single leg work. I wasn't exaggerating this evening when I was like, you don't need any kit. Your body weight is going to do it all for you. 3, 2, 1. Take a pause, grab a drink, take a minute, and then we're going to go back through those exercises. So you know what's coming now, which makes it a bit easier. But equally, if you fatigued in any of these exercises, no problem. You can do less this time around. Have a think about where was it tricky? Which side was it trickier on? Are there certain things that you need to practice in those movements? That's exactly what this is all about. So we're going to go back to the single leg negative calf raises. Again, do what works for you in terms of reps time. I have got a minute on the clock, but you can do less. You can't really do more because you'll lose track of us. But when you're doing your own work outside of this, you can do multiple sets. You can do more reps if that works for you. So grab your weapon of choice in terms of step. Doesn't matter which leg you start on because we're going to do both, but you're going to drive yourself up from that stretch and then lower under control. Really coming up on top of those toes. Exhaling as you come away from the floor. That's the hard part, but controlling that descent too. So as I said, if at any point you're like, oh, this is painful now, my calves are on fire, you can absolutely take a rest. If you feel good, keep going. If you need to reset as I do because you want something really slippy, feel free to do that as well. But feeling that stretch as your heel comes below the floor and then driving up, getting over that big toe and then lowering under control. So that's 40 seconds done. We've got 20 more to go for your maximum this evening. But again, tempo, reps entirely up to you. Last 10 seconds. My calves are awake. I hope yours are too. 3, 2, 1. Switch on over to the other side. Get yourself nice and stacked. So again, I'm leaning on a wall, but make sure you're not leaning into the wall, that you're really nice and upright, that the wall is just that element of support. Banisters on stairs can be perfect for this. You saw me using poles in previous weeks. Anything that just helps you to keep your balance. But I want you to have nice upright posture when you're doing this, that you haven't kind of keeled in and leaned into the wall too much. What have we got? That's 30 seconds done. So pause as you need to. Keep going if it feels good. Nice work. You can see the slow bobbing up and down of people on my screen. There's 45 seconds. So into the last 15. Pause if you need to. You've got 10 seconds if you're still going. 3, 2, 1. Take a pause. Right, we've got those shrimpy squats again. So basically some single leg squat work with an element of extension through the hip, which means basically take that leg backwards slightly. So again, if it worked for you, feel free to hold on to that. That might help you create some stability. But for some people, this position isn't comfortable in itself. So you might choose to just work in a smaller range. But off we go. I'm going to hold my leg. It gives me something to work on. And then focusing on whatever depth is good for you. Obviously, you want to challenge yourself, but if you find that it's just making you fall all over the place, then just shallow that up a little bit, but really work on engaging that short foot and driving yourself up again. Up. And find that spot to look at. That is always my biggest challenge when I'm teaching, is trying to balance and then look periodically to the camera, that I'm not just away in a world of my own. Right, you got 10 seconds. No, I've gone. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Into the other side. So again, hold the leg if that works for you, but again, extend that hip back slightly and then work through that range there. Or just take the leg back if that feels better for you. You can make it small. Again, if you really need to, fingertips on a wall to get you going, but if you find you're leaning into the wall, that's not really going to help you in this. So small little movements, getting bigger as and where you can, keeping it smaller if that feels better for you. Keeping that other knee close so you haven't kind of opened out. Trying to get that knee to track over your kind of middle toe, but you will see more movement through your knee here because basically you're having to balance more. It's not so easy. You'll probably feel a lot of movement through the foot as well. You've got about 10 seconds left if you're going for the full minute. Whoop. 3, 2, 1. Take a pause. We're going back into that deadlift. So if the single leg was great for you, come single leg with me again. If you're practicing on your hinge and you're using the wall, really think about that hinge movement. The step between the two would be a kickstand deadlift. So all the weight would be in that front leg. The toe would be down on the back leg to give you some balance and keep your hips forward. But again, you will really practice pushing your bum backwards and forwards as opposed to any of this or this. You see a lot of like just upper body moving. That bum's got to go back. That bum's got to come forward. So kickstand is your halfway house between moving between your two-footed and your single leg. But if you're good with single leg, come with me, pushing through that heel, finding that spot to balance and using your bum. Exhaling, pushing back with the glutes, never anything lifting with the upper body. So think about keeping your ribs down towards your hips. Your abs really nice and tight here so that your lower back is not arching. You're not taking that strain. Do whatever works with your arms. I tend to prefer to just have mine out of the way, and I'm quite used to holding a weight when I'm doing this. But if you want to put them out for balance and that works for you, no problem. Really thinking about those hips coming forwards, not opening out into that aeroplane. What have we got? We've got about 15 seconds here. So neck nice and long, looking at the floor ahead of you. Whoop. Pushing through that back heel, really lengthening through the body. 3, 2, 1. Other leg. So again, start small, particularly if this is your weaker leg. Most of us start with our strongest side first, and then we come when we're tired to the weaker side and ask quite a lot of it. So remember, when you're kind of thinking about it at home, practicing any of these moves, my advice would always be do your weakest side first and cap your reps or your time by basically what that side can do with beautiful form. Once the reps are poor form, it's really not worth just carrying on, to be honest. We want nice form, regress the exercise if we can't do it well. Hinging over, pushing through that back heel, keeping those hips forward, no opening up, No arching of the back. Everything's really tight. It comes over in a hinge and then pushes back in a hinge. You've got about 5 seconds left here. 3, 2, I don't know what I did last one. 1, take a pause. Lunges, side into that curtsy. So we're coming out to the side and then either stopping in the middle and curtsying after, or coming straight between the two of them to suit you. Keeping that chest nice and high, that beautiful posture. Really working through that standing glute. You will feel the other one working too. Pausing as you need to. Slowing the tempo down. It can be less of a lunge. It can be more. You can get really low and then really low on that curtsy. So whatever feels good and feels challenging, I want you to feel like you're working, but work that you can win at. So we've got 10 seconds of normal, doing up to a minute. But on any and all of these, this is about finding what works for you. Where you are now is exactly that, your starting point. Come to the other side, and then you've got something to measure your progress against as you practice these moves and become more familiar with them. I'm going to come further over. I've got a slippy bit on the edge of my mat, and I can't commit to a lunge if I think I'm about to do side splits badly, because these inner thighs are way too tight for splits. Pausing in the middle as before, if that feels better. Keeping those hips really forward. And then thinking, as I said, on that side lunge, of when you lunge out, what's out? Is it knee? Is it toe? Is it hip? That's what we're aiming for. That's where you're going to feel the most of that stretch. What's happening with that standing foot? Is it coming off the floor? Again, really ground that foot. You've got about 10 seconds left. Oh, 2, 1, take a pause. We are going to go one final time through, but we're going to do 30 seconds each leg this time. So slightly lesser amount of work. As before, if you need to pause, no problem. Now's your time to grab a quick drink. Again, stretch anything out that needs it. Is it quads? Is it hips? Ugh. Hamstrings? Is it those calves? Get up on something and really stretch them out, whatever you need. So, negative calf raises, 30 seconds each side. Find your step. Again, leaning onto something, but not leaning into it. We're driving on up and lowering under control. And you'll find that as you tire, the movement starts to become smaller. So I want you to really work on as much range as you've got and pausing where you need to, because you're going to get more out of that than just a little kind of push up and down as you get tired. Whoop. Lost it entirely. Next time I'm going to find like an actual step that I can put here easily and be in shot with. We've got 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Come into the other side. Whoop. Doesn't help my feet getting all sweaty now in here. That's delightful, isn't it? Up and down. Exhaling on the way up. Getting up over those toes as much as you can. Feeling that stretch as you come down as low as you can. We've got about 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Into our shrimpy squat. So up to you whether you're holding your leg. You know what you're doing now after the first 2 rounds. Get yourself nice and balanced. Think about that short foot on that leg. Sink it down and drive on up again. So that hip is extended. It doesn't have to be ridiculously far back, but it is slightly further back than the other leg. You are grounding that foot and exhaling as you push up. That's where you're engaging your pelvic floor as well. Sinking as low into that, as feels good. Keeping that knee tracking as central as you can. As I said, there will be more movement here. That's really normal, but you don't want your knee falling in massively. Again, you kind of want to be able to ground that foot, which is going to be difficult if you've got too much weight over the side. We've got about 10 seconds. 3, 2, 1. So it wasn't even 10 seconds, was it? To the other side. Sink it down. Drive on up again. So again, that slight bit of hip extension, not crazy, but it is back slightly. Sinking it down. I'm going to turn to face you. My balance, whilst looking sideways at a camera, is not my forte. And again, this side is much harder for me. So I have to really work hard to balance on here. It's not easy to get as low on this side. So just challenging yourself. Your chest will come forward in this. That's really normal. That's you counterbalancing to keep yourself nice and upright. All good. What have we got? We've got about 10 seconds. I know I say that most of the time. It is broadly 10 seconds. I can't be bothered to always work it out. 3, 2, 1. Into that deadlift. So again, think about if that kickstand is a good idea for you as you move through that movement, or you're still on the wall, really practicing that double movement, and then really thinking about keeping everything tight so there's no arching of the back, no rounding of the back. Come with me. Ground that foot, push through the other heel, hinge yourself over, push your bum to come back to standing. And obviously the progression to this is either more, obviously we don't want to be doing hours of single leg deadlifts, or starting to add a weight. So you can hold that weight centrally. That obviously means your bum's having to work harder, or you can hold the weight on one side. They both bring slightly different challenges to the body and both have a place in a workout. So don't worry too much about which one you're doing. 2, 1, over to the other side, ground the foot. Again, really keeping those hips pointing forward so we're not opening out. That toe should be pointing down to the floor. So if you're doing this, it's hard to tell if you haven't got a mirror, but your toes either kind of crossing the body in a curtsy or pointing out. That's indicating tension in your hips that we need to work. Oh, there's a wall that we need to work on to help you with that position. Keeping those ribs down so the back isn't arching. 3, 2, 1. Lunges, last set. Bring it out to the side and then into your curtsy. You can come between the two if that feels best. And then really thinking about keeping that foot grounded, generating that momentum as you come up, sitting into that so your hip comes out, keeping that chest up nice and high. Hips are staying forwards on that curtsy so you can feel it in the side of your bum. And then again, this can be weighted. You can do this from a deficit off a block. Every time you think you've nailed an exercise, there's always a way, switch to the other side, to make it more challenging. And that's the fun. Doesn't always have to be new, more complicated exercises. There's a lot to be said for really nailing the basics and having great mobility through your body. We've got about 20 seconds. No, we haven't. We've got about 10 seconds left. Who knew that I used to work with numbers in a previous life, eh? 3, 2, 1. Take a pause. So we're finishing this evening, as we always do, with a little bit of focus for the pelvic floor. So if you have something available that you can work with in terms of the wedge like we did in the first week, and it can be like rolled up towel. So this kind of half dome here could just be a towel rolled up underneath my heels, something soft and comfortable to stand on. We're going to be downhill for a little bit. We're going to be uphill for a little bit. And we're going to be practicing that band pull and that pelvic floor engagement. So deliberately, a simple exercise so you can really connect to that pelvic floor and engage it. But not on 2 feet. This is single leg week, ladies. We're going to be doing it on a single leg. So we're going to go downhill first. So happens when we're running. This is going to engage more the front of your pelvic floor. Obviously, the gradient will just depend on what you've got to work here. So you want to stand on one foot, really ground that foot. Make sure your hips are nice and level. We're not hiked one way or the other. And then as you exhale, you're going to pull the band. But more importantly, you are grounding that front foot. You are squeezing and lifting your pelvic floor. You are using that tension through the arms to really help you engage. So this is a really conscious engagement of the pelvic floor. I'm going to come off for a second while you keep going. And again, it's upper back doing the work here. It's not ribs, lower back, none of that's going on. Get myself nice and ready. So think about drawing your coccyx, the tailbone of your spine, and your pubic bone closer together, gently lifting that pelvic floor. So that squeeze and lift is always happening on the exhale. Everything, all the magic is on the exhale. Right, come to the other leg. So again, get yourself nice and balanced. Make sure your hips are nice and level. Other leg can be behind you, in front of you, whatever's comfortable. As you exhale, ground that front foot, so that short foot we've been practicing. Engage that pelvic floor. Pull that band. So you can adjust your band. Obviously, the closer you hold it, the more tension. The further away, the less. You want enough tension that you can feel something happening in terms of engaging your core muscles and your upper back. But if you start to recruit all your shoulders and neck because you've gone really tough on the band, loosen it off. The purpose is very much pelvic floor coordination here rather than kind of upper back workout. Whoop. We've got about 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Let go. Moving downhill, ladies. You know we're going uphill to finish. So again, we're going to be on that single leg. This time it's going to be more the back of your pelvic floor that you are likely to feel working. So standing on one leg, hips nice and level. As you exhale, ground the foot, squeeze and lift the pelvic floor. Let everything go, including the pelvic floor. As you exhale, ground the foot, coccyx to pubis, lift that entire pelvic floor and let go. So pulling those shoulder blades together, working with your own breath, keeping your ribs down towards your hips. So again, really nice and engaged through the abs. We've got about 15 seconds here. If this is really easy for you, deliberately start to throw yourself off balance a little bit as you're doing it. So you're having to work a little bit harder there. That's only if you've got a really nice engagement and this has become really easy. As I said, the purpose of this is real pelvic floor work rather than single leg. And switch to the other one, although of course it is building on it. So you might really feel your calves being stretched here if they're particularly tight. Exhale, squeeze and lift that pelvic floor. Inhale, let everything go. Creating that grounded foot, that short foot as you exhale too. Keeping the hips nice and level so we haven't dipped one way or the other. Everything is working here. And now we're going uphill. Also happens a lot when we're running because most of us don't have a nice flat route to run on. So again, being able to, engage your pelvic floor in different planes, really important. 3, 2, 1. You are done, ladies. Lovely work. So that is week 4 of Fit2Run. Lots of single leg work in there, lots of progression on the things that we've been doing. So if there's anything today that you're like, oh my God, that was really difficult, hopefully you've got lots of variations through what we've done, or you can look back to previous weeks. And if you're like, oh my God, that was really easy, great, I've got more stuff coming for you next week. But as I've talked about there, we can add weight, we can add deficits. There are lots of things we can do to make this more challenging, or it could just be as simple as some more reps and sets in your own time. So if you've got any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and have a chat. If you need to pop off, give me a wave and do. And I look forward to seeing you again next week.